Hello everyone. This is my first video with Zoom. So I'm going to try and make it as best as I can. It's not such an easy thing, this technology. But my first video is going to be first to introduce my channel. So this channel is going to be a historical channel, but it will have some philosophical flavor to it, which means that every time we're going to analyze a certain philosophy, certain historical events and happenings, and then we're going to ask some philosophical question. By the time we finish quite a few of them, we will understand why we ask these questions and what does it mean for our lives, for humanity, for many, many things. So the first video will be on the sources of Judaism, because I'm going to go through my first book, which was called Culture of Wealth, and it's published at Amazon. And I'm going to go through it, and then we will realize things that happened in history which can teach us many, many things about life. So the first video is on Judaism, because Judaism was the first monotheistic religion, or at least maybe it wasn't the first, but the first Abrahamic monotheistic religion. From Judaism, Christianity evolved, and then later Islam evolved, and as we will show. So this is where this whole thing begins. In the Bible, it's called the land of Canaan, but you see here, there was the kingdom of Israel, and beneath it, the kingdom of Judah, and then the kingdom of Edom. Now, and then you had here, they call it Arabu tribes. That's probably a new name, but all these tribes come from the deserts. And then at some stage, they occupy the area which was inhabited before by, it looks like, by the Egyptians, from the archaeological findings that there are there. So the first thing is, I would like to bust the religious myths and the facts and the fiction as to the origins of Judaism. All the religious Jewish population, as well as all Christian populations, will refer to the biblical stories of the Torah as the starting point of the Jewish nations. And there's many stories, Abraham, Solomon, what have you. And for centuries, many historical books that were written by Jewish, Christian, and secular authors had partially been based on the biblical Torah. The result is that the biblical Torah acquired the status of like a historical document, which it is not. And as you will see, later on in Christianity and Islam, their religious writings as well has become a kind of a historical writing where people are in the mind thinks that these are historical documents. But as we will show, most of these documents are made up by men in order to cement their religions, to cement their beliefs, and to do all kinds of, manipulations in order to get the people to unite and become a nation. And there's all kinds of things that are going on when religion is involved. So, what is the biggest problem with all the Torah stories in Judaism? And as you'll find out again, in Christianity and Islam is the same. The biggest problem is that there's no archaeological evidence whatsoever to support them. And the little bit of archaeological evidence that there is, some of it actually contradicts the stories. So the stories are partially true, and sometimes they are completely not true. Why? Because every time a religion or anyone wants to write about himself, he wants to put himself in the best possible light, even when things are not right. So even if they are not right, they will find excuses why they are not right, like saying you didn't follow the ways of God, and therefore the things bad that have fallen on you, and stories like that. But the reality is that these stories are all but stories. So when we analyze any historical document, or what we call a historical document, like a religious document, we have to try and see, are there any archaeological proof? And if there isn't, is there any historical proof that is outside the stories? And then try and see if that historical proof is reliable too. Because normally the other side will try to make himself look good. Okay, so I said that the first noteworthy observation is that there's no evidence of the Torah before the destruction of the first temple, which led into what they call the Babylonian exile. Not even a trace of an imported document such as the Ten Commandments. The core principle on which the Torah is based is the Ten Commandments, and there isn't any archaeological finding, on them. Now, what's interesting about Judaism is when they said that they returned from the Babylonian exile, there is historical archaeological evidence, and the Torah is becoming the central focus of Jews and their existence. So, one of the interesting things in order to analyze how Judaism came all about is the alphabet that is used. Now, the alphabet is crucial because the Torah was written with what they call the imperial Aramaic script. And Aramaic was the language that everyone spoke in that area. So it was the Babylonian Empire, but everybody spoke Aramaic. Why? Because when the Babylonian conquered it, and even before them, the Assyrians, when they conquered it, they left Aramaic as the language of the empire. And why was that so? I would think that it was because of the alphabet. Because before the alphabet, all these empires used to document in what they call the cuneiform writing, which is way more complicated than the alphabet. And then the alphabet changed everything. And one of the main things that we're going to talk about here is the alphabet, because the alphabet has changed history of humanity, as we shall see. So what is the imperial Aramaic script? It's like a square, I will show you just now, but it's different from what they call the ancient Hebrew and Phoenician alphabet. Here you have the alphabets here. And then, I don't know if you can see here, they call it the Proto-Sinaitic alphabet, because they believe that it started somewhere in the Sinai. Now, in history, they tell you that the alphabet was invented by the Phoenicians. And why is that? Because the historian Herodotus wrote once at 460 BC that we, the Greeks, we learned the alphabet from the Phoenicians. But who did the Phoenicians learn the alphabet from? Do you think they invented it? Well, it doesn't look like it. It looks like the alphabet was before it was in Phoenicia, and there's the Phoenician alphabet, which is exactly like the ancient Hebrew alphabet. The ancient Hebrew alphabet is exactly like that. Now, in the southern areas of what they call the ancient kingdom of Israel and Judea, that was the alphabet. And it looks like from what they call the Proto-Sinaitic alphabet. Okay, if you look, they are similar. Okay. And then this alphabet is the basis of the alphabets that came afterwards. And this alphabet slowly moved up to Phoenicia, and from there to the surrounding areas. And if we looked here in the map, here, if you see here, Phoenicia is here. And there is Judea, closer to the Sinai. And from there, it moved up, and it looks like it spread to the Arameans, okay? And the Arameans, since then, have developed a nicer alphabet, okay, which is today called the Hebrew alphabet. But it is the Imperial Aramaic alphabet, okay? And then can you see that the Hebrew alphabet is very similar to the Aramaic alphabet? Now, we're not going to go into the ins and outs of the alphabet because that's very interesting by itself. But we're going to continue with our lecture here. And we can see that some of the letters go through, I mean, from the Hebrew Phoenician alphabet to the Greek alphabet, from there to the Latin alphabet. And the Latin alphabet is the basis of the English alphabet. And some of the letters you can see, like for instance, a snake. Now in Hebrew it's nachash. So the first word, the first letter is like an N, but the Hebrew N, maybe I can show it to you, is something like this. And the ancient one is something like a snake. Can you see a snake? Now this is the Sinaitic alphabet. And if you think about carefully, the S in English is equivalent to a snake. And it's the first letter in the word snake. And another one that is very important is the I. You know, in Hebrew it's Ein, okay? And you can see it was modeled on the I. That's why it's called Ein, the letter itself. And I don't see the connection to English here, but it was first an I, and like an I, drawn like an I, and then later on it caught like other forms like the O, you know? Okay. Now, the fact that the Bible has been written in this type of alphabet, which I said the Aramean alphabet, and not the ancient Hebrew script, can show a strong indication that it's been written either during the Babylonian captivity or during the Persian rule of the Middle East. Therefore, the Bible must have been written by people who wrote and understood the Royal Aramaic alphabet. And the audience for these people had to be people who are literate in this alphabet. Now, if you look at that area, who are literate in this alphabet? Arameans and Babylonian Jews. The Babylonian Jews were naturally the most suited candidates for the Bible itself. It couldn't have been any other population, okay? Because the other population used to still use the Phoenician, the old Hebrew and Phoenician alphabet. and they could not recognize even a single character from the Imperial Aramaic writings. So, now, what else is interesting in the Bible is that if we think that the Bible was written either during or just a little bit after the Babylonian exile, then we can see that all the things that they call prophecies, I would term them like a hindsight pseudo-prophecies, because these things were known. I mean, these histories were known. So whoever wrote the Bible, he wrote it like it was not known. And this is the one thing that is always appear in all of these things, is the backdating. Backdating is in every religion. Every time somebody writes something, he tries to backdate it. Why? Because he's writing something that is known. So he knows it, he knows that it's known now, but he has to give the impression to the reader that he's writing the thing and he doesn't know. Okay? So he's actually predicting, he's prophesying, you know, he's making a prophecy. But that's not the case. So, what is the archaeological evidence that we have that can maybe support the fact that Judaism started really after the Babylonian exile, not before? One of the things is the gods. We all know that the Jewish God is the one God. In English, it's called Yahweh. In Hebrew, it's Yehovah. And it's a monotheistic religion, okay? But when they did excavations, and especially there is a archaeologist named Dever, William Dever, he found out that in many of the dwellings they had two statues of gods, one male god and one female god. And the male god is the Yahweh, but the female god was called Asherah. And that's a very interesting story as well, because Asherah comes from the word Osher, which means happiness. But later on, it went through and even changed into what you call up to Aster, which is, Asherah is Ashtar in Babylonian, and then from there comes Asteri in Greek, and then star, star, the stars in the sky. Perhaps there was some constellations that look like a woman. I don't know, I can't figure it out now on top of my head, but that's what it probably was. And then the main thing is that they had two gods. Now later, when they come from Babylon, when the Jews leave Babylon and come over to what they call the Holy Land, these statues are non-existent anymore. Okay, so there were statues, but of just a male god, and later on they don't even exist. But on coins they do, and I will show you later on one of these coins. So, what do we say here? Archaeological evidence of small personal artifacts from the Babylonian exile era that had once been in Judea indicate that it had been common to possess statues of Baal and Asherah. Now, Baal is the other name that the Canaanites used for the same god, which is the Yahweh. Okay, now, so the male and female god, which has been considered the gods of all nations in Canaan, and in Canaan they had other gods as well on top of the male and female god. And the Judeans, they partook in the custom of the Canaanites, And their male god was named Yahweh, and alongside his god, he had a goddess, a female one, which was called Asherah. So the main thing to learn from that Judaism had not originally been a purely monotheistic religion, but rather a dual theism worship for God and his goddess consort, male and female gods. There we have the female god. This one is in the Israel Museum, okay? And it's from the 8th to the 6th century BCE. And there we have the male god. Now this coin is just after they return from the Babylonian exile. So at that time they were under what you call the Persian Empire rule. And if you look carefully, you will see that this god is like riding in a chariot with wings. And he holds like a bird, maybe an eagle, which is closer to the Zoroastrian, because I would say that when the Persians conquered Babylonia, many of the Babylonians and the Jewish people that were there, that were already were Babylonians. They've been there maybe 100 years. Okay, the Bible says 70, but you can never count on the Bible for exact timing. So they already been mixtures, and they probably were Babylonians. And in order for them to escape persecution, they turned into some of their ancestors, because they were mixed Babylonians and Jews. They turned into some of their ancestors' gods, and they took only the one, which was Yahweh. By that, putting a face into the, making a face that they are believers, monotheistic believers, the same as the Zoroastrians. And I think that helped them in securing treaties with the Zoroastrians, the Persian Empire. And there's a lot of evidence for that, because they started becoming like a good, good cooperation. And the Persians were using them as, making armies and using them to conquer Egypt. And that's where the start of the Jewish big population of Egypt starting, which you can see later on in my videos, that it's in the Hellenistic time. So we spoke about Dr. William Dever. He's a famous archaeologist, and he made some YouTubes on this subject. And he said that before the Babylonian exile, there were two gods, and after, one god. So now, I know that some of you will think that this is maybe I'm like biased because I'm an ethnic Jew, but you have to remember, I'm not a religious Jew. And I'm a kind of what you would call an agnostic Jew. However, I do have beliefs and I do have values, and they are very close to the Jewish religion. And at some stage, as we get to know each other closer, I will lay down these values and beliefs, and then you will understand that I am trying to be as neutral as possible when it comes to all religions. However, it must be acknowledged that the first people it looks like, the first people that came up with the alphabet were these Judeans, or at least mixture of Judeans and tribes from the desert. They were the first ones to come with this alphabet. And this alphabet later on has changed the world, because it became the Greek alphabet, and from there, it went into, it became the Greek alphabet. It later turned into the Latin alphabet, and it's the same thing. It's the Aleph became an Alpha and became an A, and Bet became a Beta and became a B, and C was Gamma, which was Gimel, and Dalet became a Delta, and then became a D, and so on. So the basis of the Latin alphabet in its core is the Hebrew alphabet. Now, this is important because we today use the English alphabet, which is a Latin alphabet, but no one ever gives any credit to the Jews that actually probably invented the alphabet. Now, the alphabet is very, very important. Without the alphabet, we can't convey proper information. That was the whole idea, that with the alphabet, you could have made structured words and sentences, and then chapters, and then whole books, and you could have conveyed messages. Either it's a technological message or a theological message. And just you have to remember that theology at that time was everything. It was science. You know, there was no, I speak about a long time ago. It was involved, you know, the people of the Bible thought that they knew how the world was created, and you know, the Genesis stories and so on. I'm not going to repeat them here, but I'm sure that all of you know all these stories. Okay, so again, so we said, if we sideline the Torah stories and we turn to archaeology, we find that all the Israelite Judeans and the Phoenicians, Ammonites, Moabites, all these people around there, Arameans, had most probably been the Canaanites that the Bible describes. And the most southern Canaanite nation that was bordering Egypt was the Israelites and Judeans. That's the Sinai. So these are the places where the oldest Hebrew, I would put slash Phoenician because the world knows it as the Phoenician alphabet, but these are the scripts that were found there, the Proto-Sinaitic alphabet. Now, they were before the Phoenician alphabet. They come from the areas where Israelites and Jews dwelled, and therefore some credit must be given to Jewish people on the alphabet. Now, there's many questions like what is the importance of the alphabet from the ancient time to modern times, and we discussed it a little bit now. And we said where the alphabet originates from. And one thing that is important to know is for future is who were the Arameans, because the Hebrew alphabet and the Aramaic alphabet are what you call the precursors to the Jewish Babylonian alphabet. Now, these were Jews that live in Babylonia, and they had big centers there until the Arab invasion in the mid-7th century, early to mid-7th century. Now, why is it important? Because as later on, we will find out that the Jewish Babylonian Aramaic is the basis for the Arabic alphabet and language. And if we would be able to prove that, we can prove a lot about the Islam and the Arab invasions, and we can disprove or prove Islamic stories. But that will come later on. So, who were the Arameans? The Arameans were living mostly where Syria and southern Iraq today. And at some stage, it was called the Babylonian Empire. It was part of the Babylonian Empire. And the first time that the Arameans appear in archaeology is the Assyrian occupation there, which was probably at 1100. And they said that they subjugated the Alamo Arameans, Alama Armaya. And they might have subjugated them, but it's like anything else. they inherited their language. Okay. Now, something interesting about the Jewish, I will speak about the Jewish alphabet, but like I said, it's very close to the Aramean alphabet. So you can easily say that you can speak about the Aramean alphabet. So the Hebrew, today they call it the Hebrew alphabet, but it was what I would say the Jewish alphabet, because the ancient Hebrew was more like Phoenician. The Jewish alphabet was more like Aramean, okay? And then if you look at the language itself, the language itself seems to be like a philosophical language. It's very, very interesting. Now, because I know Hebrew, I can understand it, and I will try to convey to you in English. And then the main example that I always give is this. If you say in English man, and you say blood, and you say earth, there's no phonetical questions between all these things. Man is a man, it's M-A-N, blood is B-L-O-O-D, and earth, you can see how it's spelled. And you have no connection. Now, funny enough, in Hebrew, they all derived from one word, which is the dam. It eventually appears in Arabic as well. It's actually called dam. But dam, at least in the Arabic that is closer to what you call Jordan-Palestinian Arabic. But dam means blood. And now look how miraculous. You put an A before and it becomes Adam, which is man, Adam. Now, you put another A after that and becomes Adama, which is earth, Adama. So from the word blood comes man and comes earth. And if you remember the biblical sentence, from the earth you came and to earth you shall return, which means like when you are born, you're actually coming from the earth because your mom ate food and there you are. And when you die and decompose, you return into the earth. And how philosophical the language, the blood and the man, so the man and his blood come from the earth, they are inside the earth. You see, blood and man are inside the whole earth, which is Adama. Okay, so the blood is inside the man, and the man is inside the earth. And there you are. These are the words that comprise man, blood, and earth, and they can explain the biblical sentence of to the earth, from the earth you came, and to the earth you shall return. Other ones are very important, very interesting as well, but it's difficult to explain in English, but I can try. Let's say sky. Sky, in Hebrew, when you say sky, you say shamayim. But when you say water, you say mayim. So mayim is water, and shamayim is sky. But sham means there. So it means, what they're trying to say is, here is water, and there's another kind of water, shamayim, their water. And that means the sky. The same thing with the sun. You know, the sun itself is comprised of their fire, which why? Because fire is esh, and sun is shamesh. Shemesh, eventually, or shamesh, means there's fire up there in the sky. So this is connected as well, this philosophy, and there's many, many examples, and maybe one day we can do a whole video on all these philosophies and linguistics, but it's connected as well to another thing which is called the gematria. And that's very important because it appears in Christianity and Islam. And because I suspect, which you will find later on, that even the New Testament and some of the Quran was written by Talmudic scholars. I know for you it sounds like shocking, but you will see as we go along in future videos that this is actually a true statement. And when Talmudic scholars were used to write, they many times used to write with what you call hidden writings underneath their sentences, something else, trying to give holiness or trying to give some characteristics to other personality, and so like for instance, what they used to do is they used to give numbers to the letters. So let me give you an example here. If you see, these are the alphabetical letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, G in English. But here, Aleph, Bet, Gimel. Now, every letter has a value. The Aleph, which is A, is valued 1. And the B, the Bet, which is B, is valued 2, and so on, until it goes to 10. But from 10, every letter starts jumping by 10. So it gets like 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Then the next level comes to 100. Then from there, the letters start jumping by hundreds, and then it stops actually here, but they invented more letters so that it goes up to 900. And this was the way that they were doing calculations before, the numerics, because numerics come from India. Funny enough, is accredited to Jewish traders that brought it from India to the West. But we will speak about it some other time. The interesting thing about this is, like, for instance, the name of God, in Hebrew lettering, comes into 26. If you count the Hebrew lettering in Gematria, it will be 26, which is interesting because there are combinations of words that will come to 26, and one of them is one love, which means God is only one and there's only one love. The rest is nothing. If you love God, you have one is 13, the love is 13, and together they give 26. The other thing that they like a lot in the Talmudic scholarships and so on is, like the number 7. You will find it's the 7 weeks of the day, and there's 7 years, and the 7 years that Jacob worked for Rachel, and many times. And you will find that in the Quran as well, and you will find that in the New Testament. So many times, like the King David. So David is actually 3 letters in Hebrew, and the letters will have these values, which is 4, 6, and 4, which is 14. And then 14 is divisible by 7, which is 2 times 7. And by doing all this type of work, they actually were inventing names and inventing places and inventing all kinds of things. And, for many Christians, like for instance, Nero Caesar, in Mark about the beast, there is the beast in the New Testament, which is 666, but in fact, it corresponds to the big villain of the Roman Empire, which according to the Christian stories, executed Paul and Peter in Rome, and his name was Neron Caesar. And in Neron Caesar, if you, Neron Kesar in Hebrew, because I said to you that I will show in the future that whoever wrote the New Testament was Jewish, that of course declared himself as Christian and started they started the Christian faith. But if you look at the Hebrew writing and you add all the letters of Neron Caesar, you will get 666. And that was the meaning, because Neron Caesar was considered as a beast. I mean, he did crazy things, and then among them, according to the Christian belief, he executed Paul and Peter. So now I have one philosophical question after this first video. And at the first glance, you might think that my questions are trivial or maybe even stupid. But as our relationship will develop, you will see what's hiding behind all those questions. And my first philosophical question will be, why was the alphabet invented? Now, if you have an answer that is longer than 3 sentences, then you don't even understand what it is about. So I give you something to think about. You will think about this thing, and then we will talk about it on the next video. And we're going to continue from there, and hopefully I will improve in making my own videos, and I'll get more comfortable with all this technology, and then we will have some great fun. So thank you very much for watching my first video, and hopefully you enjoyed it, and then we can carry on continuing answering some interesting philosophical questions and learning more about human history, which starts in religions, and of course later on it carries into science and what we know today from our technological world and many other things. Thank you very much, and have a great time.